Today we're dedicating the class La'ilui Nishmat Shlomo ben Devorah, Daniel Gedal Yeshaya ben Raphael, and Shana Shetachia, and to all the soldiers of Eretz Yisrael who gave their lives for the protection of our nation, Refuah Shelema, all the wounded soldiers, the terror victims, and Kol Am Yisrael. Also for Abraham ben Linda, Abraham ben Linda, cousins. We have to say La'ilui Nishmat, send the presents up to the Shamayim. We know in our world that we live in, it's a temporary place. As much as we want to believe that we're here forever, we see how the life goes by quickly. It passes. And from today till tomorrow, nobody knows what's going to be. But the good thing is that every day is opportunity. Every day is the ability to gather good deeds, to do mitzvot. And the learning of the Torah, the Mishnah says, is the greatest of all the mitzvot. How come the study of the Torah is the greatest of all the mitzvot? Right? Because, number one, without the study, you don't know what to do. You cannot do the halacha if you don't know what the proper protocol is. So the studying and the learning is what gives you the knowledge to do everything. But more than that, Hashem created the universe by speaking words of Torah. Hashem continues to create the universe. It's not just one time. The pasuk says, "Mechadesh betuvo bechol yom tamid." Hashem rejuvenates, recharges, and repowers the world every day. Otherwise, it wouldn't have a sustenance. Just today, one of my friends has a vegetable garden. He said, "Rabbi, I have so much stuff. Please come." He gave me a squash like I never saw, like from the Miraglim. You know, when they came back from Israel, it was this big. How big was it, Adele? No joke. It could feed 3 families, and it was delicious. Sliced it. They put some breadcrumbs in it, fried it, fat-free. Fried it a little, but it was delicious. So, such beracha. And the woman herself who planted the garden, she's becoming more observant from her garden. She says, only God could take these seeds that are unsavory, not tasty, and have beets, fresh carrots, delicious parsley and basil. I mean, you have to check those very carefully. When you look at them, she herself didn't know much. When she would go to a place that might have not been so kosher, she said, "No, I'm only ordering salad. It's okay." Now, when she looks at the basil underwater, she's tiny bugs. She goes, "I'm not eating anywhere." And you got to check all the vegetables and the fruits and for sure the lettuce and the parsley and these types of things. You have to check broccoli just to eat in a place. Impossible. It's full of bugs. She said herself, she soaked it, she put the vinegar, all of a sudden the bugs came out from it. And she tries to keep it very clean. So you have to check, not to be over. So when you learn Torah, you know the halacha. But more than that, since Hashem rejuvenates the world, gives the world chizuk, and all the fruits and vegetables, and everything grows beautifully from the world, the way it happens is through the Torah. Because we are the echo of Hashem's words. Hashem said in the beginning of creation, I'm going to make it one time for you. But after that, now we're going to go ahead and make the creation. Just move one seat over so I can see all those right behind. Okay. You're good now? One second. What about you? You want to move up? You good? Okay, come. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. So when you say words, especially the men have a special mitzvah to say words of Torah, to say continuous words again and again. That echo that comes out of your mouth, your tehillim, brings beracha to the world, brings blessing. And that's why we study and we learn. So on Shabbat, the name of the parasha is called Chukat. Zot Chukat Torah. And it talks about the red cow that they used to bring in the time of the Beit HaMikdash. What was the purpose of a red cow? Well, if people became defiled by going to a funeral and couldn't walk into the temple is very holy. And the funeral and the cemetery is tameh. Like today, we go to a cemetery, we have to wash our hands. Back then, it wasn't enough to go to the mikveh. We had to take the red cow. It was very rare to find. And they slaughter it. They burn the ashes. And then they take some ashes and mix it with water and a couple other things. And the Kohen sprinkles it on the people. And after 7 days, they're purified. This is a chok. Chok means very hard to understand how that works. Number one, why red cow? Why not black cow? There's a lot of nice black, brown cows, spotted cows, white cows. You know why the red? Because when the Jews worshipped the golden calf, the gold was thrown into fire. When gold goes into fire, it turns red. Now, the calf is the daughter of who? Who's the mother of the calf? The cow. So when a child soils himself in the palace, imagine a mother bringing a baby to visit the king. The king is her uncle. Oh, my uncle, the king, I'm so happy to see you. And the little kid now, he spits up on the floor. What does the mother do right away? The mother cleans up quickly before anybody else because the mother feels responsible for the child. So the Gemara says, Yavo ha'em, let the mother, the red cow, come and mechaper on the golden calf. Meaning that we worshipped and we sinned and we became tameh. Now you're going to purify yourself. And they paid a lot of money, sometimes millions of dollars, because it was very rare. And the cow had to be pure without any blemish. If one white hair was on it, pasul. Anything that wasn't exact was no good. It had to be red, dark brown red, perfect. And also, it can never have a yoke on it, never have any type of work on it. It had to be completely and pure. And the Mishnah tells us that what if somebody was traveling to the Beit HaMikdash? As they were traveling to the temple, they saw a beautiful red cow, and they wanted to bring it to sell it to the Beit HaMikdash, millions of dollars. So the farmer would take the red cow, and he'd travel to go to see the temple. And many times it was 2-3 days of traveling because it was far away. If you lived in Tiberias, today it takes a few hours by bus. But back then, you had to travel. So it took a long time to go. And when they went and they traveled, many times what they would do is they would camp overnight. So the wife would pack pillows and blankets. What if the man took a blanket and he put it on top of the para aduma? What would be the halacha? You know that he would lose the whole value of the cow. Because the pasuk says, Asher lo Allah aleha ol. In Hebrew, that means that the animal, the cow, did not have any burden or yoke on it. There was nothing on it. It has to be pure and soft and young without any burden. In Hebrew, the word for ol is similar when you go to the farm and you see how the cow has something on his neck, like a steering wheel on his head, on his neck, to make sure that he doesn't go off the path. So the farmer, when he plows, he puts the ol on top. But that word ol, we find it in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, called a person should accept upon himself all malchut shamayim. He should accept himself the yoke of the Torah. Just like the yoke keeps you on the right road, the cow doesn't veer off the path, so too the Torah keeps us on the good road. Doesn't let us fall off the highway and crash. Doesn't let us steer away and fall into bad habits. The Torah keeps you disciplined. That's why it's called a yoke. The all of Torah, if somebody accepts the all Torah, Hashem removes other yokes. If someone says, I don't want to accept the Torah, it's too hard. I don't want to be restricted. I want to live my life for free. Independence Day, July 4th, we want to be independent. We don't want any all. Hashem says, you could throw off the yoke of the Torah, but there's many other headaches that come to a person. Much anxiety comes from the world, much worry, much fighting, much machloket, lawsuits. The government agencies bother people. There's plenty of all to topple on somebody because no one can get away with not accepting the all. Everyone was born to toil. The pasuk says, Kol amal adam lepihu. You were born to labor and to toil, to say the words of Torah and Tehillim. Your mouth should be toiling in Torah study and not nonsense, not lashon hara. Now, if you don't want to toil and labor in the Torah, since we were born to toil, meaning everybody has a certain amount of difficulty that's allotted to him every day. When we wake up in the morning, everybody gets a cup of difficulty on their head. That's what Hashem designed. Now, the good news is you could choose which one. If you decide to choose the difficulties of the halacha, which means when you wake up, you right away wash netilat yadayim. 1, 2, 3. You don't just wake up and touch your phone. You shouldn't touch anything when you wake up in the morning before washing your hands, especially not your eyes or any of your body parts, because as a person sleeps, part of the soul exits and goes up, and it comes down a ruach of tum'ah. Overnight, the dark of the evening, and the world has a ruach, a spirit of tum'ah, that lies especially by your tips of your fingers. That's where the nails grow. And that's why if you make netilat yadayim with a cup, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, according to the Kabbalah, they do 7, 8. They get off the last 2. So then your hands become purified, and then you touch everything else. Even make a bracha. Asher kedishanu v'mizotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim. They asked Chacham ben Sion Abba Shaul, what if I have an Israeli marketplace that lives next to me? In Israel, Rabbi Ben Sion was a great Chacham, the Chacham Ovadia. He was his friend. They used to study Torah together. And they asked him, my next door neighbor, he's a makolet owner, but he's not dati. He's not a religious guy, but a nice guy, my friend. And he gives me loaves of bread, but he touches it with his hand. And I know this guy does not make netilat yadayim in the morning. I'm sure he washes his hands. I hope so. I mean, he's a human, decent being. So he should wash his hands before he does anything. But netilah, that's not in his head. Ben Sion says, try to take the bread without him, which means a lot of times they give a box. They bring Angel's Bakery. You know, they bring the box of bread. Don't let him touch it. If he does, we hope that he washed his hands, and that also takes off some of the tumah. Plain water also takes off some, but nevertheless, there's residue on it. For sure, young mothers don't know when they feed their children in the morning, they wake up, they give them cereal, they make them a bottle, should always wash. Even the baby should wash their hands. So the tumah, even little children, you should wash their hands once they're by 1 year old already. 1 year old, you should take them to the sink, wash 1, 2. Okay, it's training. But there's kiddusha when the person washes. For sure, if you eat a piece of bread, no one should eat bread without washing their hands. Besides cleanliness, netilat yadayim is a beracha you can make when you have a bagel, you have a roll, something. So we know that the tum'ah is removed when we sprinkle the water of the para aduma. And now this fellow, he's on his way to the Beit HaMikdash, and he's carrying a load of blankets that he wants to sleep, and he puts a blanket on top of the para. Says the Mishnah that the para is pasul, it's not kosher anymore. Says something interesting. What happens if the cow is now crossing an area that has mosquitoes and bugs and bees and wasps and hornets in a marsh? And as it's crossing the area, all of a sudden, it's getting attacked. Now, hey, you want to keep that cow pure, so you take a blanket and you toss it on top of the cow. What is the halacha? Now that it's carrying a blanket, it's pasul? Or maybe over here, it's different. What do you think? It's different. How come? Why do you think it's different? Since the animal is being protected by the blanket, it might look like a burden. It might look like something on top of it, but it's not called a all if it's for your protection. In Judaism, when people look at the Torah as a burden, so it's too heavy. But if you look at it as a protection, it's beautiful. It actually helps you. There's a new book that the mothers should read called The Anxious Generation of the youth today that are now being indoctrinated with their phones. This is written by the Goyim. How in Silicon Valley, they're much more ahead of we are, because they're the ones who create the phones. And they're saying in the 5 to 10 years of tremendous danger, it's going to overtake their minds completely. And the anxiety that comes from the phone and the nonsense and the shtuyot and the mind thinking, how are you going to be protected? So when the chachamim tell the children, hey, don't touch that, put that away from when they're 5 years old. The entertainment shouldn't be the phone. If the mother wants to go visit the babysitter, you put the iPad in front of the kid, in 2 seconds, it goes all to different sites, webs, and they come and the advertisement, and the worst of the worst. What you do is you hire a babysitter to read the kid a book. Jack and Jill went down the hill. That's what we read when we were kids. We were kids, we read books, and that was it. But that's healthy for the child. Play Lego blocks, but too much. So the Torah is a protection. When boys and girls at 15 and 16 and 17 get involved, when they're not ready for marriage, they only ruin it for later on. So much blessing could come to a girl who restrains. Now you're young girls, you're 17, 18, you're on the verge to meet a nice khatan. So you have the summer ahead of you. There's going to be some friends that are going to try to pull you to places to drink things, to do silly things. And all you need is one wrong move, and then your good name gets ruined. It takes a whole lifetime to earn a good name. It takes 1 second to break it. Like a crystal vase. You could work your whole life to buy a $50,000 vase, and if you drop it, the whole thing. So a good name is time and effort, especially now about to get married. So why do things that are silly and ruin it? If you follow the Torah, you're guaranteed protection. That's the secret of the all. The all of the Torah gives us divine peace. It also teaches you to be b'shalom. Tonight, a friend of mine is making a wedding. I almost called Rachel and told her I'm canceling. I was almost going to go. Problem was, it's too far away. The wedding is near Muncie. Okay, you know what? If I would have given you enough warning, we'll find a substitute. We'll go to Muncie. And he called me this morning. He said, Moshe, I don't know if you're coming or not. I told him, I have a class tonight. I'm going to send you my brook through the phone. He's a great guy. He's okay with it. He said, Moshe, you're not going to believe what happened. The wedding is supposed to be in a hotel tonight. I see a text message. The wedding is moved an hour away to a kosher place in Stamford from Muncie, to Connecticut. What happened? The boiler blew in the middle of the night in the hotel, and the hot water was all over the place. It ruined the whole, and there's no hot water. The hotel is finished. So now they have the wedding today. So he goes to tell his wife, 9 o'clock in the morning, the wedding is not there tonight. Now, he's a very gassy guy. He's a very funny guy. She's like, very funny. Nice joke. Stop joking. He's like, no, this time I'm not joking. Could you imagine the scene? Imagine you're making your wedding, your daughter's wedding tonight in the hotel. The guy said, there's nothing we can do. Please find us another place. So they have owners where they have other places. By 10 o'clock, we said we're moving everything. The trucks are going. The wife almost panicked. She called the consuegro. The lady coming with the hair, where should she go? The one with the fittings, the dress. Could you imagine everything changed in one day? And they handled it beautifully. They were beautiful. She's like, it's not in my hands, the mother said. This is in Hashem's hands. Did I do anything wrong? We didn't do anything wrong. The hotel blew up. Thank God it didn't blow up in the middle of the wedding. So you see how she's thinking? Thank God it didn't blow up in the middle of the wedding. Okay, at least he gave us 1 day notice. Now we move everything. The trucks moved. Everything went. I looked at the Waze, Connecticut. I said, for sure, I'm staying here. Thank God for Rachel in the class. Otherwise, it's far to go. But everybody who could go went. Rabbi Mansour went. He's very close to the guy. He went all the way to be with them on the day of Hatuna. And I was talking to the man. I said, how did you maintain the peace in the house? He said, not me. My consuegros, my wife, they're all malachim. They all live their life with the understanding what's the right priority. Okay, what's the goal of tonight, guys? That the boy and girl should get married. They're going to get married. If not here, there. Okay, goal number 1, priority. Hatan and Kala should get married. Goal number 2, we try our best to accommodate the people. We send text message to everybody. The hotel has been moved. If you could come, thank you. But it's not primary. The food and the decor and the music, if it's not perfect, that's okay. Nobody's perfect. Only Hashem is perfect. You see, with that attitude, that we did our best, now let Hashem do the rest. They go with happiness and everything works. It'll probably be the nicest, best wedding. And they gave them big discount. We're so sorry. We're upset. For you, I hope you're okay with it. And they're okay. How come they have this attitude? Because Torah is the priority. Hashem is the primary. Bitachon is their weapon. When you trust in God and you have high-level faith, you realize everything is letovah. Everything has a good reason, and you're not stressed. I would hate to see if it happened in our community right over here, especially a fancy wedding where they spend a lot and they plan it for 6 months and the party planners come for a year. What would you say? What would happen, Paul? They will go crazy, you know?
Yeah.
The wedding is not in the West Deal tonight, guys. And Lawrence Avenue is full. You all go to Lakewood tonight. You know, that was tremendous amount of bitachon in order to stay calm. And I got news for you. You can't control that. Nobody can control anything that's outside these 3 inches. The only thing you control is this and this. right here. Not to get upset, not to get angry. And the parasha continues. After the event of the Para Aduma, the Pasuk tells us a tragedy happened this week. Miriam HaNeviah passed away, the great Miriam. And when Miriam died, she was the one who gave the water to the people. Am Yisrael had water in her zechut. Mayim. Now we're already at the 40th year. We're at the end. And Miriam, she passes away. And they had eulogies, arayat, prayers. They cried, but not nearly enough. They didn't value the treasure of Miriam HaNeviah, who she was, because she was so modest and humble. She never spoke about herself, so nobody knew her value and greatness. But Hashem was not happy that the people didn't speak about her enough. Why? When the big Chacham would pass away, they would make eulogies and crying. Moshe Rabbeinu, Aharon, how come Miriam? She's not less. So the next day, the well that was in her merit, now you have to imagine 3 million people in the desert for 40 years. How are they drinking water? So there was a rock the size of this table, maybe bigger from here to the ceiling, huge rock. It was a boulder. And as the Jews traveled, miraculously, the stone, that rock rolled. Ever have Rolling Stones? That's where it started. Okay, that was the old rock and roll, right? The Rolling Stone. That's where it started. The Eben HaGalgal. It was a real stone that was rolling with them. And as they landed, so now the stone came in the middle of the camp, and 12 different pipes would come out. Each tribe would get another pipe, and a stream of water was continuously 24/7 gushing from the rock. This was called Be'er Miriam. It was a miracle, but they saw it every day, so they got used to it. Not a miracle anymore. If you see man fall down from heaven every day, it's not a miracle. Imagine you live in a country where it's dry, and the first time ever they see rain. Wow, miracle. Well, do we say miracle when we see rain? No miracle. Rain is a rain. You go to Monmouth Medical and a little baby's born from nothing, a tiny little microscopic cell, a child. Nobody's saying miracle. Well, 25 of them are born every day. In Lakewood, 100 every day. Baruch Hashem. But it's a blessing. Jersey Shore, Kimball, Monmouth, there's a beracha. What if somebody went to a cemetery and saw a dead body pop up from the grave? They'd be so jumping, wow! And then another one. The news would come, they would go crazy. Wow, look at this guy. He's like, hey guys, what's up? Everybody run, they run for your life. But if it happened every day, after a few weeks, okay, it's old news. That's what happens. Now, what's a bigger miracle? A baby born or a dead body coming up from the grave? So on the surface, you think a dead body because it's crazy. We never saw it. But logically, if a baby comes from nothing, a microscopic tiny grain of salt split into a million pieces. Take a grain of salt, split it a million, and all of a sudden a human being comes. So from a human, to make a human is easy. Even the cloning laboratories could do it. Take one cell and reclone it, big deal. To make nothing to something is a huge miracle. To make Tchiat HaMetim is nothing for Hashem. But baby born is not miracle anymore because you get used to it. And that's what happened in the desert. They got used to the well. They got used to the rock. They got used to the man. After a while, you get used to things. You take it for granted. And then when they woke up in the morning after Miriam died, there was no more water. The well stopped. Like, where's the water? All the water stopped. Halas. Now, whatever water they had in the bottles, they drank. And the whole day, they're very thirsty. And the next day, they're very thirsty again. And they're dying of thirst. There's no more water in the city. And Hashem say, you see, did you appreciate Miriam HaNeviah? Hashem tells Moshe, take your stick and speak to the rock. 40 years ago, what did Hashem tell Moshe to do with the stick? To hit the rock. In the beginning, when they came in the desert 40 years earlier, the rock produced water. But now, Hashem said, speak to the rock because the people are mature. A little baby doesn't listen, you give chapta, come on, move yourself. But a mature person, you don't hit, you speak. It would be a great Kiddush Hashem. Now the rock of Miriam wasn't in its usual place. It was rolling with them, and it got lost in the desert with a bunch of other rocks. So Moshe wasn't sure which rock it is. And not only that, the people started to get agitated. They gathered upon Moshe, and they were starting to make him very nervous. Moshe, where's the water? And then came the big complainers, the Erev Rav, and they said, Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not enough that you took us out of Egypt. We should die in the desert of thirst. They started complaining. They started criticizing and talking bad about Hashem. It's bad enough to talk about people, but if somebody's a chronic complainer, that's Lashon Hara on God. That's much worse. We don't say Lashon Hara on Hashem. So the people now began to agitate Moshe. And Moshe says, Shem'una hamorim. Listen, rebellious ones, why are you not listening to Hashem? From this rock, God can bring water. Of course we can bring out water from the rock. And Moshe speaks to the rock and nothing happens. So he thought, maybe I'm speaking to the wrong rock. Maybe I'm talking to the wrong place. What? So now the people who are in the naysayers say, you see, it doesn't work. So he went to another rock. Didn't work. Finally, he saw another rock. He said, no, this must be the one, because some water was trickling from it. So he spoke and nothing. Now he said, wait, Hashem told me to take the stick. If it doesn't listen to the words, boom, he hit it. And he hit it twice, and water gushed out. The water came gushing out. And Hashem said, Moshe, why'd you hit the rock? I told you to speak to the rock. Yeah, but the people, you got upset. You see, when you get emotional, you get upset. Never make reactions when you're emotional, makes mistakes. The greatest man in history is Moshe Rabbeinu. Nobody greater than Moshe. And the most humble. Yet, the Pasuk says, Hashem was upset. And he said, you and Aharon could have made a greatest Kiddush Hashem. Had you just spoken calmly, the world would have seen, similar to Mount Sinai, the Pasuk says, V'chol ha'am ro'im et hakolot. They would have seen the great thunder and lightning, and they would have seen Hashem. Throughout history, they would see that you say Torah, and there's a reaction. The water comes from the rock. No longer would any Jew have to be hit. No Holocaust, no October 7th, no Inquisition, nothing. We don't need hit anymore. You see how devastating? A tiny microscopic mistake of hitting the rock. Of course, it's a Moshe on his great level. And because of this, Moshe never went into Eretz Yisrael. Really, it wouldn't be right for the people all to die in the desert and the captain of the ship to go inside to Eretz Yisrael. So Hashem was really looking for any way to keep Moshe with them in the desert, because when they died in the desert with Moshe, then came Tchiyat HaMetim. Tchiyat HaMetim, revival of the dead, and Moshe would bring them all. We see how Hashem is midakdek with the Saddiqim, even a tiny drop, that they said, we will bring you water from the rock. Hashem said, we will bring you water. I bring the water. If you look at the words, he said, Notzi lachem mayim. So tiny little mistakes. Hashem says, you don't bring water, I bring the water. That's why it didn't work when he was talking to the wrong rock. So on his great tzaddik level, Hashem was midakdek, teaching us how we have to look at the tzaddikim, how great they are, and Moshe starts to pray 515 times, tefillot again and again. I want to go to Eretz Yisrael. Hashem said, die, enough, stop praying. I made a gezerah, and Moshe accepted it. The next part of the parasha talks about Aharon, who passes away. Because now we're on the verge of the 40 years is almost over, and he goes to a place called Hor Hahar, and Hashem gives him a divine kiss. He brings up Aharon to the mountain, and a cloud comes down. Moshe can't see Aharon. Where are you? He says, I feel the most tremendous bliss possible. The Shekhinah came and took his soul out, just like taking out the hair from a cup of milk. The righteous people, their whole life, they're very attached to Hashem. What's in their consciousness? You see these 3 inches here? They're always thinking, how could I be better? What can I do for Hashem? Torah, mitzvot. They don't get influenced by the world. So all they're thinking about is Hashem. On the final day, it's very pleasurable. But if a person is very gashmiyut, very physical, all they think about is eat, sleep, drink, fun, party, shop, go, return the food, return the clothing. And what happens is when the neshama exits, it doesn't have a happiness. It's attached too much to the physical, so it's painful. Aharon was a great exit. And Moshe said, I wish my final should be like that. And when that happened, the people were very sad because everybody loved Aharon HaKohen. He made shalom between everybody. 80,000 children were born from those 3 million people in the desert. 3 million people is a lot of people. 80,000 were born that year. They all called their son Aharon, to name after the great tzaddik who made shalom. Now, when Aharon passed away, Another gift disappeared. The Ananei HaKavod. Moshe, he brought them back. He brought back the well. He brought back the Anan in the merit. But these three gifts of the clouds, the man, and the clouds of glory and the well were all in the Zechut of Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. So when it left, so the people were vulnerable, and the Amalek began to attack them. So there was a war. If you read the parasha, it's very interesting stories happened this week in Chukat. That's why tonight we decided to tell you the things that are happening in the parasha, because there are a lot of lessons here. And what happened was, they came to a city called Edom. If you look at Israel, imagine this is a state. This is Eretz Yisrael. So on the top is Tzafon. Here's the north of Israel, Sefat, Tiberia. As you go lower, Yerushalayim in the center. Then on the left side is the Yam HaTichon, the ocean. On the right is the Jordan, if you're looking at the land of Israel. And finally, you get to the bottom, is where Eilat is. All the way on the bottom, past Be'er Sheva, south. Gaza, all the way on the left, on the right, Eilat, and Edom. Edom is on the border between where Egypt is, Rafah at the end, and the Jordan today, Petra, at the bottom of Israel. And the Jewish people were very close to coming into the land. They're about to enter. And the Edom said, no, you can't pass. If you pass through, we'll go out with a hedef. We'll fight you. So Hashem said, it's not time to attack Edomites because they are the children of Esav and they have kibud avayim. Since they respect their parents in their genes, they're Italian. Till today, the Romans come from Esav. Papa, mama, they have kavod for their father and their mother. They don't mess around with the grandpa. They have respect. We have to learn. Esav had the most kavod for his father. So since he had kavod, we don't have a right to attack them. Now they have to go back up. Now, you ever get into the car to travel somewhere? We had an incident. One of our neighbors was going to Israel for winter break. They got to the airport and she opened her pocketbook. She realized she took the wrong pocketbook and all her passports were back in New Jersey. It was too late. They missed their flight. That was it. Okay, they accepted it. But it was painful for the kids. You got to go back home. Come back tomorrow. Okay, it wasn't the end of the world. They went back tomorrow. They went. They had a nice trip. What happens when you're traveling to Vermont in the car, 6-7 hours? You realize you forgot your medicine that you need. You have to go back now. It's very hard. For 40 years, the Jews are traveling throughout the desert. They're about to get in. Okay, back up now. Here's Israel. They're about to go in. Now back up. 7 stations. Hundreds of miles in the desert. Another 6 months traveling. The people were like this. They couldn't take it. The pasuk says, "Vatiktsar ha'am baderech." The people became very tired and sick and tired of traveling. And I'll read to you. When Edom refused the Jews to come in, they had to go and circuit around through the wilderness. This was a great blow for Am Yisrael. They were very tired of their long years of wandering and impatient to reach the land. The remaining men of the generation who were there started to complain to Moshe. Why have you taken us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? We're almost at the border of Israel. And now we must turn back into the desert. We've been wandering for the last 38 years because 2 years they were at Mount Sinai. We can no longer bear it. The people also saw the hardships of the future Edom exile. Hashem gave them Ruach HaKodesh. They were able to see the exile that we're in today for 2,000 years. So they foresaw 2,000 years of detaining. Just like in the desert, they were about to get in and Edom blocked them. So too we're trying to get into Eretz Yisrael and we're in the Edom exile. Edom is America. It's part of it. All part of that exile. So the people got down. Again, we'll have to eat the man, which is unnatural, because they never had to use the restroom. Our stomachs are going to burst. The people's complaints were unfounded and regarded by Hashem as lashon hara on the food, on the man. We can't talk bad about the food of Hashem. A heavenly voice proclaimed, listen, you ungrateful people, after all the kindness I performed for you, you are dissatisfied? You see how serious God takes our complaints? If you go outside, oh, it's so hot. Well, you want the freezing winter now? Yeah, it's July. It's supposed to be hot. Thank Hashem, it's warm and sunny, and we're in a good mood. We're happy. So don't complain. Too much complaining, Hashem gets upset. I gave you marvelous food, the man, totally absorbed by the body, sparing you from the necessity of leaving the camp to relieve yourself. Instead, you complain. Your route around the land of Edom also was intended for your benefit, because the Edomites were planning to destroy you. Well, said Hashem, a snake whose food tastes like dust but does not complain will come and punish those who complain about the food. And God sends poisonous snakes that inflicted fatal bites upon some of the complainers. Others were fatally bitten by other wild scorpions. The complainers realized that they had done wrong. Falling down before Moshe, they confessed, we sinned. We spoke about Hashem, and you pray to Hashem that he remove the serpents from us. Moshe immediately forgave them, because if someone asks you forgiveness, you should never hold a grudge. Let it go. He begged Hashem on behalf of the sinners. God instructed, fabricate a large serpent called a saraf. This saraf means it burns out venom and poison, and make it out of copper, a copper snake, and attach it to the top of a very high pole, like a big telephone pole, so it's visible from any point in the Israeli camp. Any Jew who is bitten by a wild snake, a dog, a scorpion, will be healed by glancing briefly at this saraf, at the snake. If anyone received a snake bite, he has to look at it intently to recover. Now, when they did that, Hashem put the command to Moshe to put the snake on top, and sure enough, whenever a Jew was bitten by the snake, he would look at the saraf and he would heal. And the question the commentaries ask is, number one, first of all, the last thing you want to look at if you're bitten by a snake is a snake. You know, that scientists say if someone's bitten by a dog that has rabies, and the worst thing to do is to see the dog, because it causes PTSD. It causes post-traumatic stress. The Ramban writes that if you're bitten by an animal and you see it, you'll get worse. So if someone's bitten by a snake, the last thing you want to look at is a snake. But somehow the snake on top of the pole became the symbol of healing. In many pharmacies, if you look at the top of the pharmacy, it looks like a snake around the pole. You ever saw it? How come? Comes from the Torah. Everything from the Torah. And the question is simple. If a snake bites you, you run away from it. You don't look at the pole. And the second question is, does a snake really heal you? It's almost like idol worship. To go look up at a snake of copper and say that the snake heals you? How could it be that it would do such a thing? Not only that, many years later, that snake was taken and hidden by King Chizkiyahu HaMelech. He crushed it. Why? Because people began to worship the snake. You see how Avodah Zarah came from there. So why would Hashem tell Moshe to put it on top of a pole and to look at it to heal? And the rabbis say a very important lesson. In life, there's always a snake that comes to bite us. Not necessarily is it a poison reptile on the floor, but it's what we call a headache. There's a worry about the shidduch of the children. There's worry about parnasah. And sometimes the neighbors say something and they cause us to get bitten by a snake. No one understands that Hashem is the one behind the snake. It's not the snake. When you looked up to the heavens, they looked past the snake and they saw Hashem in the heaven. And they remembered that God is the one who sent it to them to wake them up, not to complain, to become better. And the nature of a person is to run from the snake bite, but the Jew who's above nature runs towards it, embraces the bite, and says, Hashem, tell me what I have to fix. Somebody came to the rabbi and said, my husband is very difficult to live with. He's impossible. He's like the snake. I can't live with him. Could you live with a snake in the house? Very hard. He's biting, he's criticizing, putting down, negative, screaming, yelling. So the rabbi said, okay, the easy solution is to get a divorce. Run away from the snake. But is that what the Jews did? They didn't run away from the snake. They look at the snake, they embrace the snake, and they say, if Hashem put me here, I have to make myself better. Forget about him. I have to work on myself, not to get mad, to be calm. Eventually, the husband changes. Of course, there are some situations where you have to get. There's nothing to talk. Every case needs its own understanding. But in general, when you have problems and headaches, they're there for your benefit. There was a rabbi who came to our community last year. His name was Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson. Rabbi Jacobson, he speaks very nice, and he's very close to the Rebbe of Chabad. He's one of the students of the Rebbe of Lubavitch. And He told us a story that in 1968, there was a woman, her name was Shirley Chisholm. She was an African-American black lady who was the first African-American black woman in New York to be elected to Congress. It was a nice, smart lady, Shirley Chisholm, and she became part of the New York team. But the other politicians, they weren't too fond, especially in the 60s, it wasn't like today. So they gave her a job. Okay, you're going to be part of Congress. You're a part of the National Agriculture of New York. Was that a joke? There's not a tree or a bush in New York. New York City, Crown Heights, where they live. Agriculture? What are you talking about? It was like almost mocking her. They made her in charge of Congress. You're going to be in charge of the growing and the farm. What farms? There's no farms in Brooklyn. You ever go to Brooklyn? You can't park your car. Forget about a farm. So she was very hurt by it. She felt like it was a snake biting her. It wasn't nice. Meanwhile, down the block lived the Lubavitch Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson. He was the Rebbe who lived there. And he sent his secretary to give her kavod. Because she now became the first African-American congresswoman, it was a sensation, especially for New York. So he said, I want to give you a blessing. So she came very nice to the rabbi. And he gave her the blessing that she should be successful. And then she opened up. She said, but Rabbi, I got to ask you, why would God put me here to give me such a job? To be in charge of agriculture and growing and food, it doesn't apply to New York. So he said, sit down, open up the Bible. Everything you want is in the Bible. When you feel like things are not going right in your life, that's a difficulty. But the Torah tells us that in every difficulty, there's an opportunity, because God only does good. Hashem is the source of good, and he only says good and does good. So if that's the case, there must be something good. Let's think. Where in all the states are agriculture grown? Well, in the Midwest. As a matter of fact, the rabbi said, I was reading, it's very knowledgeable, that in the Midwest, there's a crisis going on because many fruits and vegetables and wheat are flown in and brought in by ship from South America. They're much cheaper. And the farmers of the Midwest are suffering with over surplus. So there's a big surplus going on. You know all the African-American people who are struggling. There's no jobs. So why don't you go ahead and make the shidduch that the surplus should be shipped in boxes and given to the poor and help the people. I like that idea. Okay, we'll see. Sure enough, a couple of months later, she's in Capitol Hill. She's in Congress. And they're discussing different things. And Bob Dole, who later was going for the nominee of president, he was an important guy, Bob Dole, he was a senator. He got up to speak. And one of the biggest problems was that in the Midwest, there's a surplus of growth, tremendous amount of influx of vegetables and fruits, and they don't know what to do with it. They have to throw it into the ocean and destroy it after all their work. And now the damage, because they can't lower the price too low, that's going to hurt the whole economy. So she gets up, Shirley Chisholm, and she says, well, we have a solution. There are millions of people that are starving, people who cannot have job placement. Why don't we go ahead and take the surplus and help the people with it as a charity? And they took notes, and sure enough, she gave credit. She said it was the rabbi's idea, and she was the one who started what they call WIC program. WIC is Women, Infants, and Children. Today, half of Lakewood has the WIC. It's a beracha that they give them the fruits, the vegetables, they give them food stamps. She created it. It was this woman who did it. And 15 years later, when she finished her term, she got up and she was a very successful woman. She said, I have to tell you that the most important part of my career was creating the food stamp and the WIC for the poor, helping millions of people eat, people who didn't have. And she said, I credit it to a rabbi who lives down my block, Rabbi Schneerson, who taught me that when the snake bites, don't run away from the snake. Embrace the snake, embrace the headache, embrace the problem. And with that, you'll see blessing. And that was Kiddush Hashem. Many of our synagogues are sponsored by a man named Mr. Ralph Towel. You could see a lot of shuls in Brooklyn. Mr. Tawil, his grandchildren are here till today, great-grandchildren. He was a very special man. His yahrzeit is tonight. Ralph's yahrzeit is tonight. Mr. Tawil passed away. He was almost 98 years old. And when he was a little child, he was an orphan. His mother passed away when he was 7 years old. Him and his brothers, he had a brother Harry, a brother Maya, and 2 sisters. There were 5 siblings without a mother. And the father, they moved from Mexico to New York, and it was very hard for him to take care of 5 children. He was a father trying to work, so a foster home took them. But the kids, they hated it in a foster home without a mother, no father. Father came to visit to do whatever he could. And 4 years later, the father got ill and he died. Imagine, they're 11 years old, the kids. 11-year-old kid, Ralph was. His brother Harry, they had to support themselves. They had no father and no mother. Later on in life, he became very successful, this man. Very rich, powerful, and he helped everybody. So one day we were having a class, and his grandson, Mr. Joey Dayan, Rabbi Joey, and was there asking him and talking to him. And says, Grandpa, how come you're the first one to give the tzedakah? He says, sit down, I'll tell you why. If somebody asks you for 100 or me for 100, I'll be much quicker to give it because I went through it. I know what the pain is. And he sat down to tell them how they suffered without food, without clothes. He said, we had 1 pair of pants, had holes in it, had to last me the whole year. 1 shirt, because finally at 14 and 15 years old, somebody gave me some inventory to sell. I would go to the streets of New York after evening time. I didn't have connections to go into businesses to sell. I would have socks. I would have a bag of socks that I owned, 10 pairs of socks. I would go to a place where they're eating, a bar. Hey, we want to buy a pair? Yeah, I'll buy a pair, 25 cents, 50 cents, $1. They would buy a pair of socks. He said, for 6 months, I saved up every penny till I had my own inventory. I had 60 pairs in my backpack I would carry, and I would support my brothers and sisters. One day I walked into a place, and they said, oh, what do you have? And these guys were drinking, they were high, they were obnoxious goyim. They said, oh, what kind of stock? They took it and they started throwing it over my head to their friend, playing games with it. I said, hey, that's my panasa. That's my whole life is that. Give that back. They started throwing it all around. They grabbed my bag, and I tried to grab it back, and I found myself outside the restaurant where they were. They beat me up. I was on the floor, bleeding, and they took everything. I had nothing left. And I lay down on the floor crying. I looked up to heaven. No father, no mother, no parnasah. 6 months, I worked my brains out just to have a little inventory. Now it's gone. Hashem, what do you want from me? Hashem, I'm down. I can't get up. Then he told his grandson. At that moment, a voice came into my head and said, never again will I be thrown down on the floor like this. Ralph, get up now. Get up. Voice in my brain said, get up. And I got up. I said, I'm going to start again. And this time I'm going to do it right. And I got the right inventory. And I started again. And I got better places. And then I met the icon of our community, Mr. Isaac Shalom, I Shalom, who helped so many people. And I Shalom said, I'm going to give you inventory now to sell, much better than socks. You have linens and handkerchiefs, all kinds of bedding. On one condition, Mr. Tao, how are you going to pay me back? I'm going to give you $6,000 of money and inventory to go sell. I want you to be a businessman. He says, well, I have $300 I saved. You have my word. He said, your word is not worth more than $300. You only have 300. But I'll tell you what, when you make your first 5,000, you take 500 and you give it to tzedakah. Promise me you're going to separate 10% for the yeshivot, for the synagogues, for the poor, for the aniyim. And on that day, he taught him how to do charity. And he made 5,000, gave 500. 20, he gave 2,000. 10, he kept on giving and giving, and the rest is history. The man became one of the most successful manufacturers of clothing. He himself manufactured for Calvin Klein, for Donna Karan. He made their clothing. In the 70s and the 80s, they bought real estate. They became fantastically wealthy, and he shared his money till he passed. He gave away everything for the yeshivot. And he said, my greatest success was the day that I was down on the floor, the day that I was beaten down, bleeding, stripped of everything, had nothing there. That was the biggest snake bite of my life. But that snake bite, I didn't run away from it. I embraced it. I said, Hashem, you're going to give me strength to get back up and to fight and to become a legend today. One of his grandsons from the Sit family, David Sit, was once up north in a hotel somewhere, in a orphanage, actually, in Netanya. He walks in, he sees Ralph Tawil orphanage. He spoke to the fellow. He said, that was my grandfather. He says, your grandfather loved this place because when he was a kid, he was in the orphanage. He went to, not this one, but a similar one. He knows what it is. He bought the place for them. And he was looking up. He said, now I know my grandfather put his name. He's really a humble man. He didn't want his name on plaques, but you know why he did it? So his grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-grandchildren around should say, hey, look what grandpa did. He said that motivated him a lot, the grandsons, to help and to donate and to give and to do chesed. So let's review what we learned tonight. We started with Zot Chukat Torah, the Para Aduma teaches us a law. It's not just Chukat HaTorah, it's the Para Chukat of the whole Torah. Otherwise, you would say Chukat HaPara. Why the Torah? Because when the all is on it, it only looks like a all if it's not for the benefit. But when the cow has a benefit, the blanket's not an all. All of Jewish living is for your benefit. So instead of kvetching and complaining, thank Hashem. When you thank and you're in a good mood, Hashem gives you biracha. And we studied about Miriam. They didn't eulogize her enough. And the water of Miriam came back when Moshe hit the rock. But because he hit the rock, that was it. He got to stay with the people in the Midbar. The Saraf, the Nachash HaNachosh, has taught us that when a snake bites, remember Shirley Chisholm, she thought it was the worst day. She became famous from that. She helped so many people, Mr. Ralph Towel. When God gives us something, we have to know that it's a gift. One of the great Rebbes of Nadvarna had a student. He was a 30-year-old Avrech living in Israel. And this young man was diagnosed with a very bad disease. He was having muscle problems and all kinds of things in his body that weren't working. And the doctors told him he needs to go to America to take special tests. And the specialists looked at all his charts and they saw that he has a very bad illness, very rare disease. So the doctor came and told this young man, Chaim, they called him Chaim, I have to give you the news. I don't know how to tell this to you, but you have a very rare disease. And this disease, nobody lives from. So you have 2 years left to your life. Imagine a 30-year-old guy hears that news. And this guy, Chaim, he wasn't a regular guy. He was a big believer in Hashem. He was a big tzaddik. So he looked at him, he said, oh, okay. Like no reaction. He didn't flip out. The doctor said, I don't understand. When I tell this news to people, I hate to be the bearer of it, but I have to tell them. They faint on the floor, they cry, they scream. You? Could you tell me what's going through your head? How's it possible? I tell a 30-year-old man you have 2 years left to life, yet you're okay. He told him, I was trained very differently. My head is hardwired. Since I'm a baby, my mother and father always told me, whatever Hashem does, you thank him. You say, thank you, Todah. So in my brain, I'm thinking 2 years, my son is going to be bar mitzvah next year. Thank God I'll take him to the bar mitzvah. At least I'll be able to take him to he'll be 12, 13 years old. He said, second though, if it's 2 years, there's 730 days. 730 days, I could say Modeh Ani. Now I make 100 blessings a day. What's 100 times 700? 70,000 berachot. I'm excited. And he's going one after another, looking at the positive, thanking. The doctor said, hey, I got to take notes because this I never heard in my life. He was very impressed with him. And he told him, goodbye. You know how long ago this story took place? 13 years ago. Do you know the guy's still thanking Hashem? He's still alive. New technology came, new medicines. He's still going. What happened to that rare disease? Doctors could give prescriptions, but never predictions. No, don't worry about the snake bite. Hashem sent him for a reason. And with his good mind, his good head, he was able to heal. He was able to get better. And so we learned tonight an important lesson of faith that we should always mechazek ourselves. Like Mr. Towel, never get down, get back up. And Hashem will give you blessing. Hatzlacha. God willing, we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Okay, girls, we'll see you, God willing.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom, stay well.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you. Nice to see you.